Alright, you guys see the title of the video, The Truth About Israel. For those of you who don't know me, I recently went on a trip to Israel and I had a crazy experience. So this video is that. This is also my excuse to not have to tell the same story 50 times over. So let's get into it. Actually, pause. Before we get into it, I know that there's going to be people asking me about my thoughts about Palestine and Israel and the conflict. If you want to know about that and don't care about the rest of the video, look at the description down below. Jump to that timestamp. But let's get into it. First off, why did I even go to Israel and how did I get to go in the first place? Well, the first reason I went to Israel is because I'm a Christian. And for anybody who knows about the faith, there's 3 Abrahamic religions that are really popular within the world. You've got Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And Israel is like the place to go for all 3. This is the location where a lot of the events in the Bible took place and our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ himself lived and conducted miracles. Anybody who knows me knows I love reading my word. So actually going to the locations that I read about all the time was like a no-brainer. And then also, truth being told, like when it comes to the conflict, I was very scared to do my research and do my homework because I'm biased. I have a friend who's in Israel. He's also part of the IDF, the Israel Defense Force. And so I'm hearing his perspective on things and I'm seeing what mainstream media is pushing out. Now, there's the mainstream media that leans right and the mainstream media that leans left. In a lot of the spaces that I'm in, my media leans left. So I'm seeing a lot of people talk about Palestine and I'm seeing a lot of people be pro-Palestinian. And I knew that if I use my voice, I'm going to get a lot of hate and a lot of backlash that I just wasn't ready for. So I was able to just push it off because I'm an American. I didn't want to dive into it. And generally, I like taking nuanced approaches to things. So I wanted to have a first-hand experience myself and see the voice that gets drowned out a lot in the left mainstream media. So this leads me to how I even got there in the first place. I got invited to Israel by this organization called CUFI, which means Christians United for Israel. They're an organization that has been around for decades, and they've been like a liaison, a partner, freaking ambassador. That's the word. They've been like an ambassador, not necessarily legally, but they do have legal implications because of how they work with the government. But they're an ambassador between America and Israel, between Christians and Jews, and so their goal ultimately is to bridge the gap between America, Christianity, and Israel and Judaism. And the reason why I was selected is because I'm a content creator. When they reached out to me, my platform was around 130,000 on TikTok, and then on Instagram, I'm approaching 10K now, but at the time I had like 7 or 8,000. So, yeah, they wanted me to make content while I was out there to kind of give a fresh perspective or my own perspective on what it's like being in Israel, to try and change the social narrative of what was going on. So you combine a lifelong desire of wanting to go to Israel with my passion of creating content, and it was an obvious no-brainer. Now, hear what I'm not saying. When I made this decision, I was unaware of the implications and the understanding of what was happening in Israel. Like I said, I was hands off. I knew about October 7th. I didn't know about the whole war that has been taking place between Palestine and Israel for hundreds of years. Or we'll get into that later. And so with that being said, I've already posted a lot of content on my TikTok and my Instagram. And if you want to see that, you'll get a more first-hand vlog approach. But this video will not be a vlog. But as a result of me just posting videos there, people are telling me I support, I'm a baby killer, I'm X, Y, and Z, all because I went to go visit a country, and that was a bit much for me. That was a bit extreme. Like me making a video about tourism, me making a video about me visiting, not even touching the political climate, had people sending me hate and backlash, and I was like, this is next level. And had I known all of this information before I went, I probably wouldn't have gone, to be honest. I would have been too afraid. I wouldn't have been ready for the repercussions or the implications of my actions. But I went, and I'm thankful I did, and I'm thankful that God allowed me to go. I had prayed about it, and it seemed right that the Lord would have me go, and I had peace. So I made that trip. So next question, how was it? This is a question that I've been asked hundreds of times. Like I said, I know a lot of people in person, but I'm also a content creator, and a lot of people were in my DMs just asking me about the experience, and it was overwhelming, and I didn't want to keep talking about it, so here's this video. But also at the same time, I was trying to vlog on this trip, and this trip was so information dense that I couldn't vlog everything for you. So me combining the video footage that I got while I was out there, while I was at first attempting to vlog, as well as me talking about it, will be the best way that I could even summarize the trip. Once I realized that there was so much information that I couldn't capture for you guys, I just turned it into like a B-roll type thing. So as I talk, you'll see what I'm talking about. But it's not an easy question for me to answer, to be honest. This was a very serious trip for me, and it was a very impactful and life altering trip. And I feel like if I honestly answered this question, a lot of people will say that I'm coming off too cynical, or I would discourage people from going to Israel. And I definitely don't want that to happen because I do want to go back and I would like a different experience. But to say that this trip was heavy is definitely like the easiest way that I could put it. The trip was taxing on me physically. I didn't get much sleep, and that's due to the schedule, but also me trying to pump out content. So I'm not blaming Kufi for that at all. The trip was very taxing on me mentally. It was a very information dense trip. I was learning a lot about the history, the culture, the political climate, the religious climate, the social climate. There was just a lot. It was very much like an educational academic trip. So couple that with my state of fatigue as we walked miles and miles and my lack of sleep, like it was just a lot for me there. Emotionally, we're learning about the impact of October 7th, which I've touched on, I think, a little bit earlier, but I can't remember. So, learning about the hostages that are still missing, learning about the amount of loss and death and tragedies that have happened. Like, Israel's peace is chaos. They were used to thriving in chaos, and it's really crazy. Israeli people are very resilient and they're very intelligent. Those are like two words that I would take away from my trip about the Israeli people. And then like even spiritual, there's a lot of spiritual warfare from me going there. I believe like even with me posting, seeing the anti-Semitism that I was getting in my comments, seeing the hate that I was getting as a result of just going there was crazy. There's a lot of lies, there's a lot of frustration, there was a lot of hate in my DMs, and it was tough for me to handle. I hadn't been in a situation like this before where I just felt like I was hated or trying to be canceled or whatever. So it was very contextual while it was a lot, and I want to stress that so that people don't feel discouraged from going. Now, when it comes to what I actually did, I don't really remember, to be honest, but I did take a lot of pictures. I do have a lot of videos. I do have vlogs on Instagram. So, but fortunately for you guys, I still do have my itinerary. So as I read through the itinerary, it'll jog my memory. So we'll go through days 1 through 8, starting with the plane ride, bro. The plane ride was crazy. I'm not gonna lie, I got some advice that was some top tier advice for traveling to Israel. If you want to go to Israel, travel during Shabbat or the Sabbath. Why? Because there's less kids on the plane and there won't be as many Jews traveling and they won't be doing their religious customs. Now, I will say it was partially the airline and not the Jews that were causing this flight to be so terrible, but I was on the aisle seat in the back. I got bumped like 40 or 50 times minimum. Like I'm talking about, it wasn't just like a slight bump where I'm okay, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm like this and I'm whole body's jerking mid sleep. I'm like, gang, I know you see me. This happened at least 40, 50 times. Like I'm not trying to exaggerate. Worst flight I've ever been on. The turbulence was so crazy that I was coming out of my seat. If I didn't have a seatbelt on, my neck would have been in the ceiling like this, turned sideways, bro. I probably would have been like in critical condition for real. And it was just a long flight. It was like 12 hours. So, yeah. Then also you saw a lot of Jews practicing their religious customs and their religious faith, getting up and down out of the seats. So it would be a lot of people traveling like over other people. Fortunately, I didn't have to experience that because there wasn't a Jewish person sitting by me. But that is something to be aware if you want to travel to Israel. If you're going during the week, there's going to be a lot of times where they're getting up to pray or to change their garments. And it's just a lot for, especially an American, to experience. I never experienced anything like that before. But when I touched down, I definitely understood the gravity of the situation. Israel's TSA is ridiculous. It's very extreme simply because of October 7th. And then as we were walking through the airport, we were just seeing signs of missing hostages saying, bring them home. Once again, I'm going to talk about the conflict later, but just to understand, due to Hamas and Palestine, what's going on there with Hamas. Hamas has captured a lot of Israeli citizens and they're holding them hostage. And a lot of the hostages have been returned, but there are still a lot that are missing. And there are hostages that are definitely dead and they're holding on to corpses, which is why Trump made that one tweet. And it's just a crazy situation, bro. So I was like, oh snap, like this is serious. So boom, day 1 we go to the town of Caesarea. This is a very common town / city. I don't remember exactly, that is talked about a lot in the Bible. So I was excited to go there, and it really put it into perspective, just like what we were in. A lot about Israel feels ancient, which can be foreign to an American citizen. See, our country is 250 years old. The Bible, when Jesus was alive 2,000 years ago, where Jesus was roaming around Caesarea, 2,000 years old. That's already 8 times as old as our place has been a country. You feel me? Our country's been a country. So you're walking around a place with insanely deep historical implications and history and culture. And that's just from Jesus' time period. And Jews and Palestinians believe that their history goes back even further than that. So back to Caesarea though, we went and visited an amphitheater that had some stone that was like 2,000 years old. We saw Herod's palace, or at least what remained of it, and we saw old ruins, to be honest, but it was cool. It is important to note though, like a lot of your mental images of what you might assume some of these places look like within Israel are just not gonna align with it at all. Archaeology is something that is fairly new to human society in general, so preserving a lot of historic places that didn't exist until about 100 or 150 years ago. So a lot of the places that you'll see are just not going to be what you envision them to be. They'll either be really run down, or they'll be right beside some modern things, or just won't exist at all and you'll be above ground. To put this into perspective or context, you're going to be walking around 27 feet above where Jesus would have walked in most locations. So a lot of the things that Jesus would have seen, done, or saw underground. Israel is constantly undergoing archaeological research. As a matter of fact, before you even build, you must obtain a builder's permit, which requires you to have an archaeological dig on the site that you're trying to build. And this is how they're finding a lot of these old locations that take place in the Bible. So, Caesarea, one of them. After that, I tried shawarma, which for those of you who don't know what shawarma is, a dish from that region that consists of a meat-based protein that has typically been spit roasted, and then you add it inside of a pita or a wrap with some toppings. And we ate a lot of shawarma. And for those of you that saw the Avengers, the first post-credit scene trailer, they talk about let's go get shawarma. That's what we ate a lot of. After that, we went to the Sea of Galilee, which is where Jesus walked on water. So another popular biblical location where Jesus did miracles on or around. And that was very cool. We prayed, we worshiped, and, just having a moment to sit with God was very dope there. Day 2, we went to the Mount of Beatitudes, which is where Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7, powerful chapters if you haven't read. So I would encourage you to go read that. And so as we walked the Mount of Beatitudes, there were stone monuments that had each of the Beatitudes on the stones. So that was pretty cool to see. Now, like I said before, a lot of these locations that you go to will have buildings on top of them as a result of people not preserving history. But what I will say is a lot of the holy sites have chapels on top of them. Now you might say, John, isn't that disrespectful? Why would they build a chapel on top of a holy site? Well, this is their means, or this was the ancient means to protect a holy site back in the day. So if they didn't want people digging up or building on top of these holy sites, they would build a chapel there and then make that ground holy that way. So it's an ancient way to preserve the holy ground, and it was very interesting. And so I saw a lot of beautiful chapels, and the chapel on the Sermon on the Mount, crazy. And as a Protestant who loves art, I just love the iconography, the statues, the artwork that I saw within these cathedrals, churches, or whatever you want to call it, sanctuaries. And so I just came away with a richer and deeper appreciation and understanding for Christian art and Christian history, because I'm like, bro, like these churches are built in a way that is so different from what we see in America. And it was really cool. After that, we went to the city of Capernaum, which is where Peter's from. But if you notice the sign, it says this is the town of Jesus. So Jesus obviously was there too. While I was there, I definitely saw one of my most favorite things that I saw while I was in Israel, which was a statue of Jesus as a homeless man. And if you see the sign, it talks about the verse where, as you do unto the least of these, you have done unto me. And so you'll see the nails in Jesus' feet, and you'll see Jesus lying on a bench dressed like a homeless person. And that was just a powerful reminder to me to really treat everybody how Christ treated us, and really be mindful to look at those who might get overlooked and try and see those who might be unseen within society. And remember that as we serve them, we are also serving Christ in the kingdom. And that was just a powerful reminder to me. While we were in Capernaum, we saw a wine press, which had a millstone, which was also very cool to me. And for those of you who know your Bible, Jesus talks about how if you make a child stumble, it is better if a millstone was hung around your neck and you were thrown into the sea. Very dark and very dramatic language to help you understand that we're not supposed to be causing other believers to stumble. So that was very interesting to me to have a visual association with a passage that I'm very familiar with. And while we were there, we also got to go to a synagogue. Now, the synagogue that we were in was much older than a first century synagogue from when Jesus was around, but it was still cool to just try and envision what it would have been like while Jesus was there. But also, to the right of the synagogue that we were in, we got to see a first century synagogue that Jesus most likely was in, but it was very much crumbled and dilapidated. So One thing I will say is if you see black stone in Israel that's part of a structure or something like that, that's typically a sign that it was around when Jesus was around. That usually means that it was built in the first century. After that, we went to the Jordan River and I saw another one of my favorite things, which was a passage of scripture plastered along a wall in different languages. And that really just reminded me of Matthew 28 and the Great Commission about how we're supposed to evangelize to every tribe, tongue, and nation. And it talks about that in Revelation too, how every tribe, tongue, and nation is going to be represented there. So that was just a powerful reminder of the kingdom of God and just seeing a visual representation of that. Now, once again, for my Bible readers, the Jordan River is where Jesus was baptized. So obviously a very significant place, and a lot of people get baptized there. I thought about getting baptized there, but the water was dumb cold, and I feel like it just wasn't necessary at the time. Would I like to get baptized there? Yes. Was that the day? Obviously not. Another funny thing is just how narrow the Jordan River is. You just kind of envision a river as being much wider. It's giving very much Crete in the sizing, but you know, it is what it is. It was still cool. And the water there is also dyed. It is not naturally that turquoise or whatever the color is. After that, we toured our beautiful hotel, which is where I would recommend anybody stay if they're going to Israel. The Magdala Hotel is phenomenal. The staff are nice. The views are incredible. The rooms are very nice. They're very high tech. So you will feel very much at home and you'll feel like you're living like a king or a queen while you're there. Now for my Bible readers, which I will keep saying throughout this entire video, if you hear Magdala and it sounds familiar, that's because you're thinking of Mary Magdalene, and Magdala is a town where she most likely lived. And so there was also a first century synagogue beside the hotel that we were staying in. And as a result of them using that builder's permit and having that archaeological dig, they weren't able to make the hotel as big as they wanted to because they ended up finding a first century town right beside of where they were trying to dig, and it was really crazy. So we got to walk through there, experience that firsthand, and that was cool. They also have another beautiful cathedral behind the hotel that I would highly encourage anybody to go into, and this is where I honestly started having questions about my faith. Now, I'm not saying I'm deconstructing, but I'm definitely reconstructing, or at least trying to have a different perspective on different denominations and what they practice and what they believe. As you walk through the cathedral, you'll notice that there are 4 sanctuaries that have images of Jesus performing various miracles. We talked to Father Kelly, one of the staff people that is pretty much over the hotel, and he was just telling us different stories of miracles or signs of God that he's seen when people interacted with some of these images. And I was like, okay. Then the main sanctuary was just insanely crafted. To your left and to your right, you'll see icons of the 12 disciples, the apostles, and then on the altar you'll see a boat that is fashioned after one of the old fishing boats that the disciples most likely would have used, and that's the altar where the preacher speaks from, which is also super sick. And then the tile on the floor is made to look like water, and then behind it there's an infinity pool, so at certain angles it looks like the boat is actually floating on water. It's incredibly crafted. Now you might say, John, why is this important? Why do you talk about this? Whenever you read the Old Testament, there are passages, I'm talking about chapters on chapters of instructions of how God is telling his people to construct his temple, right? And it seems useless, but when you go to a cathedral that has been intentionally crafted to reflect the glory of God, to reflect our worship, and you see how a building can be worship, it really makes you think like, yo, there's an art to this. There is a spiritual significance to this. And it just seemed like it would be so cool to worship and have service in a place that was constructed to glorify God in every aspect. And it just made me think like, man, some of the churches in America are so plain. Now, the part where I was talking about just like having a different perspective on my faith was when I saw the painting of the woman with the issue of blood. Incredible, phenomenal piece of artwork. Well, later after the tour, Father Kelly took me and some of the guys to just look at that painting and some of the other stuff within the church, and we had a moment where he was just encouraging us to say, hey, like, let's use this painting as a symbol of faith. Reach out your hand the same way this woman with the issue of blood is reaching out her hand. I'll take a picture of you while you do that, and then we'll send that picture to anybody that needs a miracle in their life right now. And so I got it. I was like, okay, this physical symbol is representing a spiritual practice, or it's representing a spiritual reality. So from this physical painting, we're able to have deeper faith, have a greater revelation of what the Bible is saying, which is essentially what icons are. I'm tackling this now because it's my YouTube video and it's important to me, but a lot of Protestants have issues with icons, and honestly, I understand it, but I did a lot of research while I was out there just trying to understand what their perspective on icons were. We misunderstand how other denominations view icons, and I think we do ourselves a disservice by saying that people are worshiping images when it's not that for them. Now, of course, We don't know the heart posture behind it, and that's ultimately God. But what I will say is, I'll explain it like this. One, icons were made at a time when a lot of people couldn't read scripture. So icons were a way for people to communicate the story of Jesus and the gospel in a time and a place where a lot of people were illiterate. So that's why a lot of icons have such huge significance. Two, icons are like photographs for Orthodox and Catholic believers. Whenever you look at an image in a photo, matter of fact, let me grab one. Let's take this photo here. This is a picture of me at FCA camp with my guy Joe. This picture means a lot to me because of what it represents. Is this picture significant because of this actual Polaroid? No. It's what is captured in this image that means so much to me. And what's captured in this image is not even reflected in the image itself. This picture reminds me, oh, I was at FCA camp. This picture reminds me of the relationship that I have with Joe. This picture reminds me of all the people that God has used me to impact and God has impacted me with as a result of going to camp. This picture means so much more to me than what's actually here. And it's the same way with icons. A lot of times these different denominations, they're not worshiping these images. These images mean something more. Now, once again, I'm not here to tackle the theology behind icons, but what I will say is I was able to have a better understanding of my faith as a result of what I saw while in Israel and seeing people actually use icons. And if you still have issue with a physical representation of something spiritual, look at the Old Testament. The Ark of the Covenant literally carried God's presence. People weren't worshiping the Ark. They knew that God's presence was housed there. Next topic. Day 3 is where stuff started getting very real. We went to the Syrian border, and for those of you who don't know, Syria and Israel don't necessarily like each other. As a matter of fact, Israel is completely surrounded by a bunch of ops. The only reason we were even able to go to that border in the first place is simply because IDF, the Israel Defense Force, like I talked about before, they had just gone into conflict with Syria and they had won, and so they were on the other side of the fence. And that's another thing to address, but I'll talk about a little bit more later. This wall that a lot of the media portrays to be all around Israel is usually just a fence, and it's not as effective. And I talked about that on Instagram and TikTok, so if you want to know why the wall is there, go there. But while you're there, you just see a country marked by war. There's signs everywhere telling you not to go different places because there are mines that were placed there by Syrians in the conflicts that they had. I saw a carcass of a blown up cow because a lot of cows roam in these places where there are minefields. I saw an abandoned tank. I saw a secret military turret. I saw a lot of different things that you just don't see in America on a day-to-day basis. That's like, yo, they've been in war and they're still in war. So that was the Golan Heights, which is like the mountainous area. Then after that, we went to the Alma Research Center, which is a center where they try to educate people on the history of the conflicts that Israel has been in, as well as October 7th and their terrorist attack, and just the problems and the issues that are faced when it comes to trying to solve these issues peaceably. One thing was abundantly clear while I was at the Alma Center. There was no solution that makes every party happy. If Israel is protecting themselves, they're typically threatening some of the outside countries and making the rest of the world upset. Or if Israel is not protecting themselves as best as they could be and trying to make the rest of the world happy, they're putting their citizens at risk. Very ugly situation. And the reason that is typically the case is because Israel is in the midst of being around a lot of enemies that house terrorist groups that have extremist viewpoints. It's not the actual countries themselves, but it's the groups within these countries. I'm sure that you guys have heard of Al-Qaeda and Hamas. Like, these groups are like the cartel, where they're just as strong as some of the governments that take place. Some of these terrorist groups have their own internet, their own banks, their own schools, their own housing, their own communities. Like, these organizations are not just organizations. They are military and government threats. Day 4 was also very heavily emotionally. We started the morning off with a guy lecturing us about anti-Semitism and why it is so potent and why it is so effective. As a black man, I could definitely resonate and understand where they're coming from. Anti-Semitism is another level of hatred. It's definitely spiritual. And the reason is because the Jews represent God's chosen people, and that means they represent God's morality. And a lot of people don't like God's morality. They don't like God's way of doing things. And so a lot of their hate really stems from spiritual reasons. And a big reason why a lot of Jews and Christians don't get along, although what I will say is Jews love Christians and they love Americans. While I was there, they were so thankful that I was there. A lot of Christians will say that Jews are Christ killers. And it's like, well, yeah, Jews technically killed Christ, but it was certain Jews, not all Jews, or they contributed into the death of Christ, right? So, you know, we as Christians have to make sure that we're not spreading anti-Semitism if we want to see more Jews come to Christ. But due to the history of how the church has treated the Jewish people, a lot of the church was actually spreaders of anti-Semitism. Jews don't really get along with Christians theologically, and they aren't willing to see our viewpoint on a lot of things. But once again, I had a phenomenal time in Israel. I was very safe. After that, we visited the Holocaust Museum. They told us to take no pictures, and man, when I tell you that was very heavy and very saddening. When I saw like the impact of some of the survivors that went through the Holocaust, like bro, skin and bones. Like, let me tell y'all how crazy Hitler was. Hitler is so crazy. Hitler is so wild. His goal wasn't to win the war, it was to eradicate Jews. So, in situations where he had to choose between winning a battle or eliminating Jews, he was sending Jews to the gas chamber. This cost him the war more than anything. As a matter of fact, it's really interesting how when you analyze the differences in perspectives, you see how people form different ideologies. So a lot of people believe that Jews are God's chosen people. A lot of people believe that Jews are the most resilient, most intelligent, most influential people. And this is why you see people like Kanye hating on Jews. Although a lot of the Jews that Kanye hates on, a lot of the Jews in Israel don't like, because a lot of those Jews aren't practicing believers within Hollywood or within the music industry. But this is why you see people like Kanye not a fan of the Jews. This is why you see Hitler not a fan of the Jews. See, Jews are 0.2 of the world's population, but they have 22% of the world's Nobel Peace Prizes. These people are incredible and intelligent. Now, Adolf Hitler, he understood that so much, but from the wrong perspective. He was like, yo, I don't like the influence that these Jews have. These Jews are too powerful, they're too intelligent, they're too influential. So that's why he was seeking to eradicate them. That's why he implemented. That was very interesting to understand Hitler's ideology. He would agree with me that Jews are special and significant, but just from a negative angle. He became a hater rather than a supporter. After that, we went to the pools of Bethesda, which is where Jesus conducted another miracle. And then we went to the upper room, which was in Jerusalem. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that between day 3 and 4, we traveled to Jerusalem, which was about 2 hours away from where we originally were. But Jerusalem is a very diverse place. A lot of people don't realize this. Jerusalem is known as the Old City. So as you walk around, you'll just see a lot of different old architectural structures. And it was very cool. Now, one thing about Israel, like I said, 27 feet above where Jesus walked. This is because a lot of empires resided within that small land of Israel. So what would happen is one empire would be there, another empire would come, take over, bulldoze everything, build on top, boom, 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 boom. So this kept happening and happening. So you'll see a lot of different architectural styles, and you'll see a lot of different just unique buildings within one place. So in Jerusalem, they have the four corners, which are four sections of different like faith practices. And so you have a Jewish corner, a Muslim corner, a Christian corner, and an Armenian corner, which is also Christian. So two of the corners are actually Christian. And they all get along well. You'll see people going down to Shabbat to pray at the wall, which is what we saw on Friday, because Friday is Shabbat, which is their Sabbath. So we saw people going down to pray, and then you would also hear prayer calls for Muslims going to their mosque, like living in harmony. That'll really trip you up on what mainstream media says about Jerusalem. Where we were in this one location where you can look to your left, you see the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Look to your front, you'll see the mosque, and you look to your right, and you'll see a Jewish synagogue. And it's just really interesting because a lot of times people will say like, oh yeah, like Jews, they're hateful towards X, Y, and Z groups of people, but they all reside in one place. There are Israeli Muslims, there are Israeli Christians. And then also just being able to participate in Shabbat. We got to pray at the wall. That was very fire. And I got to eat Shabbat dinner with a Jewish family. Didn't record that because no technology. We wanted to respect and reverence their home. But very welcoming. They wanted to share their culture with us. They were happy that we were there. And they were also just explaining their faith to us. And one of my favorite things about their Shabbat dinner is they pray a blessing over their family. The father prays a blessing over the members of their family every Friday. So every Friday is like celebrating Thanksgiving and Christmas in one. I don't know how to explain it. Like, it's really like a Thanksgiving every Friday because your families come together and you guys are just celebrating each other and celebrating God. I was like, man, their family unit is probably so strong because the father is consistently speaking blessings over his family each and every Friday. So that was cool. The next day we stayed in Jerusalem again. I got to go to the Garden of Gethsemane, and this was very powerful. I prayed and asked the Lord for more surrender while I was there. For those of you that don't know, and for my Bible readers, this is where Jesus prayed right before he died. Yeah, that was probably my most significant spiritual moment there. After that, we went to the places where they believe Jesus died. We went to the skull of Golgotha, which is where Jesus was crucified, and there was a tomb there, but they don't believe that's where Jesus was buried because, like, Byzantine tomb, it was dated much later than when Jesus most likely would have died. Then after that, we went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which was a phenomenal church. That was crazy. I saw multiple practicing denominations there. There's 6 practicing denominations there operating in that church and never seen anything like it. And there was a stone there, which was like a stone where believing that Jesus was actually laid to rest on. And we saw a lot of people venerating that stone, which venerating basically means respecting and reverencing, but to Protestants, it looks like worship. And so there was a lot to wrap my head around there. I'm seeing icons everywhere. I'm seeing different styles of icons everywhere, from Orthodox to Catholic, from Orthodox to Catholic icons, and it was a lot to take in, but still a very cool experience. After that, we went to the Dead Sea, which was very cool. I got to float in water in a way that I've never floated before. You literally have to do nothing and you will automatically float. So 10 out of 10 experience for me. I thought I wasn't going to enjoy it, but I had a lot more fun than I realized. Now, I will say, if you have any cuts on your body, you will find out very quickly once you get in that water. So please make sure that you are not injured while you're there. So day 6, I actually made a video about the wall already, but we toured the wall that was actually constructed. And one thing I want to say is Egypt has a 5 times bigger wall than Israel does to keep out the same groups of people that Israel are trying to keep out. But everybody hates Israel for building a wall. I find that to be very interesting. But if you want to know more about the wall, go to Instagram, go to TikTok. Then after that, we toured the city of David, which is very much underground and is still undergoing an archaeological dig, but that was very fire. There was just so much to see. And then we actually walked on a road that Jesus most likely would have walked to the temple because, once again, it was all underground, and so that wall or that road was still intact. After that, we got to pray at the temple, which was very powerful too. The steps that we walked up were the steps that the Jews would have walked up when they were going into the temple. And one thing they said about the steps was they purposely staggered the steps in a way to where you couldn't run so that you would be intentional in approaching the presence of God. Once again, buildings are worship. And as we walked those steps, they told us to read the Psalms of Ascent, which are like in Psalms 122 to like 126, I believe. And those are the Psalms that people would quote as they were going up those steps. And that was another powerful time. Now, when I talked about Shabbat, we were at the Western Wall. And one thing to understand about it is that's the remnant of when like the Roman Empire came through and tore down everything. That small section, because it's a massive wall, is all that's left of the original temple. One of the original temples, because for my Bible readers, you know that the temple got destroyed more than once. That's the difference. We were in one of the more original places, and then the temple that we prayed at was a reconstruction after the Romans had come through. Day 7 and 8 were very heavily emotionally. We got to visit the kibbutz communities, which are basically communities that are like Acts 2, where it talks about if there is something that was in need, other believers in the community would give. And so that's kind of how the kibbutz communities are structured, where a lot of people are just living in a community style where they're very family oriented. Everybody knows everybody. If there's a need in the community, they go meet it. And so the reason that we visited those communities is because of October 7th. And as a result of what happened in October 7th, a lot of the kibbutz were impacted because they live right on the border of where Hamas was, and Hamas was attacking them. And so there was a lot of loss. There was a lot of destruction that we got to see. We got to hear stories of people that had survived. Fortunately, we didn't talk to anybody that had lost immediate loved ones because they felt like it was still too tragic and too recent. But even just talking to some of the survivors of those days on October 7th, that day of October 7th, seeing this couple, the wife, she was telling the story, she was recounting it like she was there, and her hands were shaking the entire time. It was a lot. I was praying a lot. I was like, man, that's some heavy stuff. After that, we got to see the first location where Hamas attacked, and that was the Nova Festival. So basically, there was this big festival that was happening in Israel where they're celebrating music, they're dancing, all of this, just think good vibes, good fun, good energy. Not thinking about being attacked by a terrorist organization. This is where Hamas initially struck. They're slaughtering people that are going out to have a good time, and it was really sad. We were walking through the pictures of all the people that had lost their lives there, and it was just very heavy and very surreal. Then day 8, we went to Tel Aviv, which is like their Miami. It's a fast-paced lifestyle. The buildings are more expensive. There's condos, there's beaches, and it was a vibe. But in Tel Aviv, they have their hostage corner, which is the place where a lot of hostages were also taken, and they have a big timer where they're counting how many days it's been since hostages have been taken, you know what I'm saying, by Hamas, and it's been over 510 days now. That's over a year. Some people have had 2 birthdays. Some hostages have celebrated 2 birthdays in the time of their captivity, and that's just so heavy. And so it's just crazy to me to see how much hate people have for this group of people. Now, once again, I'm not saying they've done everything right in this conflict, but it's very much a real understanding that there is no winner in war. War is a very ugly and very hateful and disgusting thing where, you know what I'm saying, there's going to be loss on both sides. And to try and invalidate one side is crazy. I feel like a lot of Israel's loss has been invalidated. We also went to Save a Child's Heart, which is, it was so sweet, man. Save a Child's Heart is this one like hospital where they treat a lot of children who have heart illnesses, like it says, save a child's heart. But the thing is, a lot of these illnesses are treatable, but the countries that these kids come from aren't able to treat them. So a lot of the Save a Child's Heart kids are from places in Africa or other places within the Middle East. A lot of places from Asia, and so a lot of the people that they're treating are just like foreigners. And the Israeli passion and heart that they have, like, it's so crazy. Like, I was like, bro, you're really out here treating people that aren't your own, people that come from countries that hate you. And just to put this into perspective, the orchestrator of October 7th, the lead leader of this terrorist group that did these atrocities within Israel, was saved by a man in Tel Aviv. He was saved by an Israeli. And the man said, if you treat me, I'm going to still try and eliminate your people. And the man was focused on the good. He's like, I don't care. I still have to do this because I have to follow my convictions, bro. So yeah, that was all the things that I experienced while I was there. And as you can see, this is why it was so heavy for me. There was just a lot to unpack. There was a lot to go through.